name is Stephen Hunter. I'll be chairing the session today. Um, Before we get started, I just wanted to, um, sorry, Katrina, can you share the slides there? Before we get started, I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the land that we're on. So we're currently located on the Treaty 6 territory. It's important to acknowledge that the U of A and we all as settlers on this land, that we respect the histories, languages, and cultures of the First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and all First Peoples of Canada, whose presence continues to enrich our vibrant community. Um, I'd also like to thank on behalf of WCHRI, our founders, so the Stollery Children's Hospital and the Alberta Women's Health Foundation. So getting into the session today, we're going to have two speakers. The first is Dr. Flavio Vieira, and the second will be Dr. Amanda de Oliveira. And the way it's going to work is we're going to have Dr. Flavio speak first, and then followed by Amanda, and then we'll have questions at the end. But please feel free to ask questions in the chat as we go throughout, but be mindful that we will be answering those questions until the very end. So just a little bit of a background. I'm going to introduce our speakers and then hand it over. So Dr. Flavio Vieira is a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Alberta in the Department of Pediatrics and Agricultural, Food, and Nutritional Sciences. Dr. Vieira is a recipient of the postdoc fellowships from the Women and Children's Health Research Institute and Alberta Innovates. Dr. Vieira completed his bachelor's, master's, and PhD in human nutrition at the University of Brasilia, Brazil, his home country, with visiting periods at the University of Alberta and the University of Porto, Portugal. Dr. Vieira holds postgraduate diplomas in clinical nutrition and epidemiology and credentials as a registered dietitian specialized in nutrition therapy from Brazil. Dr. Vieira's main research interests are obesity and obesity-related conditions, working both in prevention and treatment from pediatrics to older adults, involving all aspects of obesity management, such as nutrition, exercise, behavioral changes, pharmacology, and metabolic bariatric surgery. So then I'll just present both speakers at this moment. So our next presenter after will be Dr. Amanda de Oliveira. And Dr. Amanda de Oliveira is a postdoctoral fellow in the laboratory of Dr. Sandra Davidge in the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology at the University of Alberta. She holds a WCHRI postdoctoral fellowship and a Banting postdoctoral fellowship from the Canadian Institutes of Health Research. Her research focuses on the gestational and long-term effects of excessive hypercholesterolemia in pregnancy on maternal vascular function, and her long-term career goal is to establish an independent research program using integrative approaches to study the effects of pregnancy-associated vascular changes on lifelong women's health. Okay. So from there, as I mentioned, we will hand it over to Dr. Flavio Vieira, who's going to be speaking first. And then if you have questions, just keep them in the chat and we'll answer them at the end of the session.
Hey, let me just share my screen here so we can start. Yeah, and meanwhile, thanks so much for the kind introduction, Stephen. It's a pleasure to be here representing WCHRI in this important seminar to discuss how to prepare your WCHRI abstract. Like Stephen said, I am funded by WCHRI, and I'm really an advocate that WCHRI does for all the research involved. So today, as we were presenting, we'll be discussing how to write an abstract for WCHRI Research Day. But first of all, I would like for everyone to save the date. So this year, our WCHRI Research Day will be held in person on Wednesday, November 6th. The abstract submission was open on July 4th and will close September 7 at 4 p.m. So please do not let for the last minute to do your submission at 3:50. So try to start working right away to have a good statistical analysis, a good write-up, and a turnaround with your supervisor to have a good quality abstract for submission at the end. So the objectives of the presentation today is first to review the purpose of an abstract. So why do we write an abstract? Discuss how to prepare a research abstract. So we're gonna discuss point by point on how to abstract an important and relevant abstract. Practice first steps of writing your own abstract. So we're gonna provide lots of tips for your write-up and also address some specific abstract requirements for the WCHRI 2024 Research Day. So what is the purpose of your abstract? First of all, we need to present a large amount of information in a concise manner, and we need to engage the reader. Most of the times, the abstract will be the only thing that the reader are going to read, and we want to attract them to read our full manuscript or to understand more about the research that we are developing. When are abstracts required then? So when you're trying to submit a manuscript for publications, and the requirements will be different, depends on the journal guidelines. In each journal would have their own guidelines to be followed. As part of grant applications, so the first step is to submit a letter of intent that usually is kind of an abstract or a summary. And also in the second stage of grant applications, you're going to have to provide a technical abstract or a scientific abstract, and most of the time also a lay summary abstract, but it's not the case here at WCHRI that we want to discuss the technical science. And for our case, that we want to have an abstract when we're trying to seek in consideration for a conference presentation. So you need to submit an abstract. They're going to be peer reviewed by a reviewer committee, and then to decide if you're present or not at this specific conference. Why is an abstract important then? So it's an entry point to decide if your work is accepted or not, like I said, if it's presented and what the format of the presentation. So most of the abstracts will be presented as posters, and some of them will be also selected to have an oral presentation, depends on the merit and how interested your abstract is and relevant to the science that the scope of the conference that we're dealing with. So for WCHRI, children and women's health. Some readers will not read beyond the abstract. And this could vary by different reasons. So for example, too little time, I need to do this really fast, or short attention span. I don't want to spend 1 to 2 hours reading about a lot of things that do not really matter to me. Or if they don't may not pay to read the full paper. So if your paper is not in open access, the abstract will be the only thing that is available for the readers. So it needs to have a good amount of information so people may understand and also attract them to read the entire paper. A well-written abstract can catapult your work into the view of others, especially mouth by mouth, but also a poorly written abstract might do the opposite way. So it could be ignored, it could be discarded, or even potentially remembered by others in a not attractive way. So for example, sully your reputation to some extent, and we don't hope that. So the abstracts might be structured or unstructured. So when we're dealing with structured abstracts, these will follow specific headings or sections required, and we're going to discuss those sections later on. But it could also be an unstructured, like written as a single paragraph without separations or breaking down in sections. However, both of the types will contain the same information that they are trying to convey. So for example, why we're doing this work, who we are investigating, what we are doing, where we are developing our research, how is our research being done, and so what we found with that. Key features of a good abstract is that it needs to be self-contained, so it tells a story. So you need to think about the flow of ideas and a beginning and an end. The abstract needs also to be focused, so it's short, and most of the times we are limited by the amount of words or characters. So we need to focus on the highlights and the most important things over there. And also needs to be succinct, so brevity is a virtue. The standard abstract components are usually followed by the title, introduction and background, methods, results, and conclusions. So note here that we don't have a section for discussion. This is more for when you are writing a full manuscript, but here in abstract, we just want to convey the results and conclude just what it was proposed in your objective. So discussing more about the title. So your title might be also the only thing that they read. So some readers will not even read your abstract if they don't like the title, if your title do not convey the message that they're trying to find. So use it as an opportunity to hook the reader's attention. And it's okay to be catchy, such as those two examples here. So you probably think this paper is about you, narcissists, perceptions of their personality and reputation. Or for example, you can play around with some words. So here in this case, carbon monoxide, to boldly go where no or nitric oxide has gone before. Avoid making your title too broad or vague. Try to limit. So like I told you, most of them will also have some limits for also to the write-up of the title, usually around 10 to 15 words in maximum. And for the Ricker guidelines, it limits to 265 characters, including space. But this limitation, when you're writing, it's still a little bit too big. So try to be to transmit your message without writing it too much. Try to convey the concepts involved, so the sample or population and methods if possible. One tip is also to focus more on what you found than what you did. So examples here would be poor dietary intake leads to dyslipidemia in adolescents versus dietary intake and lipid profile of adolescents. In the second example here, I don't know what was found in contrast with the first one directly leads me to the results that was found. Avoid question titles unless if you are trying to transmit the message that we do not know, but it usually is not the case. So as a general recommendation is try to avoid question titles and try to include a verb if possible. So it makes it easier to the research to process. So like this title is written, did this attention grabber grab your attention? So right now, I would like for you to take a minute and try to write a title for your abstract that you'll be proposing for WCHRI. And think about it. Is it catchy? Do you think reviewers would want to, first, read the abstract, two, look at your poster if it is selected for a poster presentation, or three, to attend your presentation if it's an oral presentation written on the program of the conference. I'll give you a minute for you to think about it.
Just while you're thinking, I just wanted to quickly inform you all that this session is being recorded with the hopes that it can be posted on the WCHRI website for other people to view who are not able to attend today.
Great. I hope you had time to try to start thinking about the title of your presentation in the following days. So starting with the introduction section. it needs to introduce your topic to the study readers. So first, it provides you a context, why you did this work. So it needs to clearly transmit the purpose of the study and build the rationale or the justification of why you're conducting a research like this. And also you need to provide your aim or your objective and try to include a declarative statement providing a verb. So for the introduction, be succinct. Space is at premium, so we don't want to waste a lots of space of our abstract trying to discuss what is already known about the literature. We want you to have more space to discuss what you are doing and what you found over that. And always remember, scientific studies are not done to prove that something is true, but to find out truth. So any research is valid and also results that do not prove something that you were initially thinking about. Thinking about the method, so general recommendations. So you need to have a goal. So explain what you did and keep it simple. You won't have time to describe all the methods and all the scores, your scales. So you need to keep it simple. If it's really needed, the person will find it over the method section if it's a publication, or you can discuss that within your presentation, poster or orally. The variables that you'll be describing will be dependent on the type of research you are conducting. So it could be a qualitative study or clinical research, populational health, or a fundamental basic science. And always need to include the study design, the setting, eligibility criteria, the primary outcome, and measurement tools. And we'll be discussing each one of those topics in the next slides. Sometimes when you have space, you can also include secondary outcomes. So regarding the study design, so it needs to be concisely and objectively stated. So is it an observational study or do you provide an intervention? So examples of study designs are pilot, case control, case series, cohort study, randomized controlled trial, or it even could be crossover studies, cross-sectional studies. It also could be a qualitative, quantitative, or mixed methods analysis. So clearly and objective state what is your study design. The setting. So especially for any research that involves a sample population, it is really important for you to know the setting. For example, try to include where overall it was performed. For example, Alberta, Canada. But you might are analyzing some samples or cells that came from different countries or different settings. For example, uh, um, from North Pole. You collect the samples over there, but you do the analysis over here in Alberta. So you need to state that your cells are not from here. This is really important for the generalizability of your study. Then try to specify your place. So if it was in hospital inpatient population or outpatient population versus the community one, and try to be as specific as possible, but of course, without breaching any kind of confidentiality. So if you are providing case report, of course, you would not be providing the name of this person or something that could lead to the identification of this person. Regarding the sample, so it is really important to detail the specific sample or population that you are dealing with and try to consider including some important demographics or characteristics about age, sex, and gender. And here it's really important for you to understand the difference between biological sex and gender as a social construct when you're writing about those things. Try to provide your ethnic background, the kind of species, the genotype, drug, and controls that you're dealing with, and also to include the most significant inclusion and exclusion criteria used to select your sample. Power calculations are not necessary for an abstract, although they are really important to define your sample, but we don't have room for that, so usually are not discussed in abstracts. Regarding measurement tools and instruments, so we want to provide a list of the names and the most significant that was used, especially related to your primary outcome, without providing too much information, but enough information that the reader can follow and understand what was performed. And there is no need for detailed information regarding the reliability or validity of each of the questionnaires and instruments that was performed. And wrap up with the analysis. So a general statement might be already enough for you. So for example, it was performed Cox, proportional regression, or compared to wild type animals. The methods regarding the analysis are more important when you're proposing abstracts that are going to be performed. So a protocol paper or something that it's currently ongoing, but it wasn't already finished. Thinking about the results. So a clinical research statement starts succinct with a summary of the subject characteristics. So we enrolled 120 participants, mean age of 17.1, standard deviation of 0.6 years, and 55% of female, 81% having congenital heart disease, and 19% a cardiomyopathy. So we are describing our full population over here and providing enough information for you to understand the generalizability of that. If you have a quantitative study, so you may provide results for the primary aim first, even if it's not significant. Remember that any result is important to move on the science, and including the assessment of variation and p-value. So we want to provide the result of the statistic analysis with an assessment of variation. Here we have the example of a standard deviation, but it could be an interquartile range, depends on how you're presenting your data, and also providing the p-value when you are providing information regarding the statistical analysis. Provide results for important secondary outcomes if the space allows. And for example, if you have a qualitative study, you may just have 1 to 2 descriptive statements regarding the summary of key themes that were coded when doing the qualitative analysis of interviews or open-ended questions, for example. Do not comment on trends. So if you did a statistical analysis and you found a p-value as like 0.06, 0.08, if they were not properly significant, try to avoid commenting on those trends. Consider a table or figure if allowed, but within weekly presentation, they do not allow submission of tables or figures as a backup for that. And do not try to detail all the results. We are sure that you did a lot, but try to focus and highlight what was really important, and especially related to your primary outcome. To wrap up with the conclusions, so what is the key message that you want the audience to take home? What is your take-home message? So usually a single sentence or two referring back to the purpose is enough. So one activity that it needs to be done over here is go back to your objectives and directly answer your objective as your conclusions. If the study is well designed, executed, we hope to support or refute the original hypothesis for that. But remember, if you didn't find what you're looking for, it's also a result that needs to be reported. And the conclusions must be supported by the results. So avoid over-extrapolation of what you found. And remember that not everything that seems to be, it really is. Thinking about after your conclusion. So implications for clinical practice are not necessary, but they are good to have if the space allows. And you can discuss the potential impact and practice change or support current practice that your work can do it. Limitations, not typically in the abstract. However, as researchers, we need to acknowledge that no study is perfect, and it demonstrates your awareness for the reviewers, especially thinking about how to overcome those limitations. And thinking about future directions. So this shows to the readers you're thinking of the next step after your results. So based on what you found, what are your future directions? What are you planning to do with that? Writing up about future directions are reasonable at WCHRI, but sometimes would not do it for national or international meetings. And for projects that are incomplete or they didn't finish, do not try to do future directions because those are based on the actual results of what it was found within your research. Here I have an example of an abstract, a clinical abstract. This is a cross-sectional study. This was presented to the Canadian Nutrition Society annual conference. So this is a national conference. And I'm going to go step by step here, discussing all those topics that I was discussing previously. Starting with the title. Here we have that poor diet quality and sedentary behavior are associated with an unfavored cardiometabolic profile in adolescents with obesity. So here we have the variables that was assessed, and this title is more related to the results that were found rather than what it was performed. So they are associated with that. And then we also have the population of interest over here. So this is concise, but at the same time provides all the important information for you to be attracted to read the paper if you are interested with. Thinking about the introduction, I broke down here as the rationale and background, and then the objectives. So here we have adolescents with obesity are at risk for developing cardiometabolic diseases. Unhealthy behaviors such as poor diet quality and insufficient physical activity can contribute to comorbidities in adulthood. So here I provide a background and a justification of why is important for you to research about it. Then I provide objectively the objectives of that study. And I broke down in two to provide that both of them are important for this research. We aim to one, characterize diet quality and physical activity, and two, to investigate whether unhealthy behaviors were associated with an unfavored cardiometabolic profile in adolescents with obesity. In this case, I'm saying that those two objectives are co-primary outcomes and not as a secondary outcome. Regarding the methods, I broke down three here to show all the aspects. So first of all, we have individuals aged 10 to 18 years with a body mass index above 950 percentile for age and sex were included in this cross-sectional secondary analysis, Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. So here I have the description of the population, so the most important inclusion criteria. We have the study design clearly stated, and also the setting that was developed here in Edmonton, Canada. Thinking about the summary of the tools and what it was developed here. From 3-day food records, diet quality was assessed using the Health Eating Index Canadian adaptation. I score below 80 means diet needs improvement. Physical activity was measured using an accelerometer over 7 consecutive days, and the recommendation is above 60 minutes per day of moderate to vigorous physical activity. And data were categorized into percentage of time spent in sedentary, light, and moderate to vigorous activity. BMI, waist circumference, and blood pressure were converted and were measured and converted to z-scores, percentiles based on age and sex, and blood metabolic markers included glucose, insulin, HOMA-IR, lipid panel, CRP, interleukin-6, and tumor necrosis factor alpha. Here I described everything that was developed here and assessed. However, I do not provide all the details of each one of the questionnaires, how the blood work was done, how was the preparation, because we don't have room for that. So we want to provide enough information for the reader to understand what was developed. And then wrap up the methods regarding our statistical analysis, at least the most important one. So here, Pearson and Spearman correlations were performed according to data distribution between diet quality, physical activity, and cardiometabolic markers. Moving ahead for the results, I broke down 3 here so we can clearly discuss the topics. So the first one is to describe your population. So here you have 39 participants, 56% females, age 12.7 years. Here I opted to use the standard deviation as a measure of variation. PMI's score of 3.1 were included. So I do have the most important demographics related to the results of my study. Then I move to discuss my first outcome. So here I do have co-primary outcomes. So here is the first primary outcome. That is the description of the diet quality and physical activity. So here we have that the Health Eating Index Canadian Adaptation Score was 62 with 92%. In here, I opted to put the prevalence followed by the N number. That is a better way for the readers to understand regarding your proportions, meeting the criterion for needing diet improvement. Most participants did not meet the physical activity recommendation, almost 91%, and sedentary behavior was predominant and followed by light physical activity of 19%. And here I have now followed the main results for the second co-primary outcome. That is the correlation and the association between diet quality, physical activity with the cardiometabolic profile. So here we have that older participants were less engaged in light and moderate vigorous physical activity. And here I show the coefficient of this correlation. So this is the actual result of that. And we also have an implications of how strong was this correlation, and followed by the exact p-value of this analysis. The Health Eating Index Canadian adaptation was negatively correlated with CRP, and more time spent in sedentary behavior was correlated with higher lipids and insulin resistance. For conclusion, I also broke down into here. So the first part is going back to my objectives, that is to describe diet quality and physical activity, and also to look for associations between them and cardiometabolic profile. So the first sentence is related to my first primary outcome, the second sentence to the second co-primary outcome. So here we have adolescents with obesity demonstrated poor diet quality and predominant sedentary behavior. So here I describe what I found. And now regarding the associations, poor diet quality was correlated with a pro-inflammatory status, while sedentary behavior correlated with an unfavorable cardiometabolic profile and age, followed by implications and future directions. So personalized nutrition guidance and stimulus for engaging in physical activity are critical for avoiding an unfavorable cardiometabolic profile during childhood and adolescence, and for the prevention of chronic obesity and complications in adulthood. So here we have now discussed all the topics of the abstract and provided guidance and examples of how to do it. Here is just an example of the poster that was developed based on this abstract. We're going to have another learning session closer to the WCHRI Research Day, so we can discuss how to do and how to perform a poster from scratch. But just of note here, we try to avoid lots of write-ups, so we try to include more figures. We try to present our results in tables, graphs, figures, and always remember to put your acknowledgements, but we will be discussing this in the future. Now I would like to pass to Amanda to continue our presentation over here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Flavio. And now we will have Amanda to finish us off with the second half of this presentation.
Thank you, Flavio. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, WCHRI, for the opportunity. So I will start with an example of an abstract. If you are a basic science researcher, and most of the elements Flavio talked about, they also apply if you are doing basic science. So when you think about your title, you would want to have, so here I have excessive hypercholesterolemia in pregnancy, and then in pairs, which is the verb that Flavio was talking about, later life maternal vascular function in rats, which will be my population. So for your this abstract, I presented at the American Physiology Summit this year. which is it's an international conference in the physiology field. And here for my introduction, I'm not going to read it all, but basically you would want to write a few sentences that provides your reader with the background, the knowledge. So when you are writing, you would want to select 3 sentences for your introduction that would provide the rationale, enough information for someone outside of your field to really understand why you want to do the research that you're doing. Like, why is it important? And then here, I always like this, I love this word. However, the little life vascular impact of this specific thing that I'm studying is not known. So letting people know. So I'm excited about this because we don't know. And as Flavio said, this has to be also realistic. You don't want to overstate. It has also to be related. So what you're doing, what you don't know. And then if you are basic science, if you're going to submit your abstract for weekly basic science, it's very common to have specifically stated your hypothesis. So here I wrote it out. We hypothesized that excessive hypercholesterolemia in pregnancy impairs later life maternal vascular function by reducing nitric oxide availability. So I have a clear hypothesis, which is what I tested. Other people may, after this is not known here, instead of writing it down, we hypothesized. You can also have hypothesis and then your clear hypothesis for your work. Both are acceptable, but usually we will have a clear hypothesis. This is very important to guide your abstract. For your methods, it's also, we also gonna break into parts. So the first part, it's the description of your model. If you are doing it could be your animal model, or if it's cell culture, a general statement. And then we have what you actually did, what specific experiment you did. And here I think if you are a summer student, you may have done, I don't know, you may have performed 1 or 2, 3 experiments that you will added. But if you are a master's student or a PhD student, you may be working on this project for like 2, 3 years, and then you've done 10, 15 different experiments. And as Flavio said, we don't have enough space. And sometimes less is more. Try to tell a story. Try to pick the experiment, not the ones that worked, but the ones that really tells the story about your study. Because if you just add everything you did, we know you did a lot. We all work a lot. Your reviewer may not understand, and you're going to cause more confusion. So try to read the abstract and see, am I telling a story here? Can people outside of my field understand what I'm saying? And then here at the end, we also have like, you have to tell people how you summarized your data. And even like, so basic science, it's usually, you're going to have quantitative research most of the time. And there are so many different ways of summarizing what you found. So you have to tell people how you summarized, and also if you use a statistical test to test for significance, which specific one have you used, and the significance. So it's very common to have a p less than 0.05 as significant, but now it's becoming more common to have p less than 0.01. And so just like a few details, and this will help to actually guide. And as you can see here, it's if you are clinical science or basic science, some of these details, they are very similar. So for your results, some of the things Flavio already went through. So you're going to provide the statements and then the p-value that you found. Is it significant? So over here, we have this part, the CD instead for control diet, and then I have some fold change. So I want to call the attention of my reviewer. So this is something very important. So I'm not just going to say that this group was more or less. I'm actually going to tell exactly how much more it was. And then another thing is, so I was working here with 2 different blood vessels. And you can think for this in the context of what you are doing. And when you're going to describe your data, your results, you want to group your data so that it makes sense. Because if you start talking about one and then you talk about the other one and you come back, it becomes very convoluted. So you want to group. So this is something very interesting for you to do when you start writing. So this is the data that I want to show, and then you put it together. So here I have 2 sets of data. So I have my results, and first I'm talking about in mesenteric arteries. So this is what happens. When I'm done with this blood vessel, then I talk about the second one. So the reviewer can go through, and instead of going in mesenteric arteries, this happens, in carotid, this happens, in mesenteric, and this, it becomes very, and how you're going to organize your abstract. We are giving you all these tips and ideas, but it's very specific to the work that you are doing, how to better put it together. And then finally, for your conclusion, same thing as Flavio had. You're going to have 1 or 2 sentences with what you found in general, and then a final sentence. So in summary, this means what this means. Why is this relevant? So here it's more like relate to your significance. And as Flavio said, in a clinical abstract, you usually on your conclusion, you're going to go back to your objective. So here we go back to our hypothesis. So I hypothesize that excessive hypercholesterolemia in pregnancy impairs later life maternal vascular function by reducing nitric oxide availability. For my conclusion, I have, in summary, excessive pregnancy-specific hypercholesterolemia contributes to later life maternal vascular function via modulation of the nitric oxide pathway. So I had a hypothesis, and now I'm going back to my hypothesis in my conclusion. So, and this is not a process that I write the background, the methods, the results, the conclusion. It's a back and forth. So you write your background and then you keep writing, and then you're going to be, oh, I still have to tell the reader this information. And then you go back to your background, or you're going to add some sentence to your methods, but you're not going to discuss the results. So you're going to go back. So it's a process. Moving forward with the example. So here I have the poster that I had for this specific abstract. As Flavio said, we're going to have later on a session. And as you can see, for the poster is where you can get very creative. You can give the same abstract to 10 different people. You're going to end up with very different posters. So here you're going to use all the different elements to call attention to your work, so that when people are walking past your poster, they want to stop and like, oh, I want to see this. So stay tuned for our next learning session. So now more into the specifics. So you know what is an abstract and the different parts. And one of the one of the things that you're gonna, when you go to RedCap to submit your abstract, that you're gonna be required is the authors of your work. And if you're new to this, maybe you are a summer student, first time doing research, you may think that the authors of your abstract would be you and your supervisor. And this may not be true. Usually you're working, I mean, we don't work alone. So you are working in a project and you have your collaborators, you have people inside the lab. If you're working with animals, tissue, you have an animal technician that is supporting you. You have a lab technician who is supporting you. And anyone who was involved in the conception, the design, the data gathering, the data analysis or writing of the abstract should be listed as an author of your abstract. Usually, the person who did the majority of the work would be listed as the first author, and then the last author will be the PI, the supervisor, and then all of your collaborators will be listed as secondary authors in your abstract. So the order in which each person will be listed may vary depending on the field. So please discuss with your supervisor who, I mean, by now you should know like who is involved in the project. But discuss like who will be listed as an author, and having authorship on an abstract and a publication, it is a lot of responsibility. Your name is there. It means that you agree with what is being presented. So it is a lot of responsibility, and not including the name of someone who should be listed as an author is also a type of research misconduct. So this is something really serious. Citations are usually not included in abstract, and WCHRI does not require citations. It should not be included. And the reason is, I know if you are an undergraduate up to this point, you've been told you should always cite. It's not your work, like especially for your background. So you are giving these specific sentences about the work. And we've been told that countless times you have to cite. It's to credit who did the work. But in an abstract, space is at a premium. So that's why it's accepted not to include, especially for the background. You should not, and for WCHRI, for some conferences, they allow, WCHRI will not allow the use of citations. And then here is something very controversial, abbreviations. So abbreviations should be avoided. They are usually used to minimize the space because, as I said, space is at a premium. So sometimes we start like abbreviating everything so that you have like a bunch of acronyms, and then you're gonna use less space so you can add more information. But then it becomes really hard to read. And if it's not, if you're reading something outside of your field, all the names of those proteins, those different drugs and stuff, it's the disease and all those acronyms, sometimes you can get lost. So please avoid. But if you were to include, so here is an example. So we have congenital heart disease. So it was written in the title, and then and we don't have the abbreviation. You cannot add the abbreviation to the title. You should add the abbreviation in the introduction. So here we have congenital heart disease, CHD, and then every time that I would talk about CHD, I would add CHD instead of congenital heart disease. In this case here, it's fine. You have one abbreviation. The problem is when you start abbreviating everything, and then you need a table to keep track sometimes of what is going on. So write your abstract. Try to minimize. Try to avoid. If really needed, that's how you should do. So you spell it first, and then you're gonna add the abbreviation. So keywords are usually not required in abstract. For some international, national, and international conferences, you may be required to provide keywords. And keywords are usually used to help recruit reviewers for your abstract. Or if you're submitting a manuscript, it will help the editor to decide who should I invite to review this manuscript based on these keywords. WCHRI does not require keywords. I just want to make sure this is clear. But if you were to submit this abstract to another venue, or maybe if this abstract will later on, you're going to publish this abstract as a manuscript, as part of a manuscript, it's usually 3 to 5. It depends on the for where you're submitting. So here I have an example. So this is a paper, a research paper, and the title of the research paper is Excessive Hypercholesterolemia in Pregnancy Impairs Rat Uterine Artery Function via Activation of Toll-like receptor 4. And my keywords are cholesterol, endothelial cells, preeclampsia, pregnancy, and toll-like receptors. As you can see here, those words, they are not to repeat the words that I already have in my title. They are to provide additional information so that the person reading can actually, okay, so this is the title, but the person to review this abstract or this manuscript should be someone with expertise in pregnancy, in preeclampsia, with toll-like receptors. It doesn't have to be toll-like receptor 4. It could be any one of them. Endothelial cells. So it's words that will help. So when you were asked to provide keywords for another conference or publication, some people make this mistake and just like, oh, okay, so let's add uterine artery, toll-like receptor 4, rat, but those are not helping. They're just like, you're just repeating yourself. And if you were to take just one thing from this presentation today, I would ask you to be this one. Consider your audience. With whom are you talking? Is it the general public? Is it a specialist in your field? Is it an expert? Is it the lay public? Because you can have the same abstract, the same study written for different, it depends the way you write, it depends on who you read. For the WCHRI Research Day, the idea is that it will be you're gonna have a broad audience. You're gonna have trainees, and then here you're gonna have undergrad students, master students, PhD students, postdocs, residents. You're gonna have researchers. You're gonna have established researchers, and you're also gonna have WCHRI funders and donors. So when you're writing, ask yourself, can a donor and understand what I'm saying? Can someone outside of my field, another PhD student, understand what I'm doing, what I'm trying to say? And I know it's so hard to do this part. It's the part that I struggle the most. It's so hard to write. And we're not talking you're not talking to the lay audience. You're talking with smart, intelligent people. but they're not expert in your field. And we have to be able to convey the information as clear as possible. And keep this in mind. WCHRI Research Day will not only include researchers, but also trainees at different stages and funders and donors. So when to start writing your abstract? The answer is the sooner the better. It is an interactive process. It's not something you're gonna write and it's gonna be done. You're gonna write and rewrite, and hopefully you're gonna have feedback from your supervisor, from your co-authors, and you're gonna have time to improve the work. Remember, all people listed as a co-author should read and be okay with you submitting your abstract. And if you have the option, also consider asking a non-author of your abstract to review for clarity. It could be a colleague, the lunchroom, or ask someone, if you read, can you understand? Like the overall idea, maybe not the small details, but this is also helps. But at least your supervisor should read and give you feedback on how to improve your abstract. Follow the directions. You should read the directions before you start. You should read the directions while you are writing your abstract. And you should also read the directions when you are done and ready to submit. Have I complied with all directions on how to do it? So the main reason an abstract is rejected is because the authors did not follow the directions. So just to recap, an abstract will have an introduction, methods, results, and conclusion. Your introduction should provide the background, aims or objectives, or a hypothesis, and methods, a summary of what you did, a summary of your results, a summary of what does that mean. So, and if you have space, why is it important? The significance of your work. You may, if you are just starting the project, you may ask yourself, like, what if I don't have data yet? So WCHRI encourages all students in early stages to submit the abstract. If you have received, if you are WCHRI funded, it is a requirement. So if you are a summer student and you received a summer studentship from WCHRI or a master PhD student, you are required to present at the WCHRI Research Day. And if you don't have data yet, how should you proceed? You can still have your introduction. So with your background, what is your objective or your hypothesis? What is the planned methodology? How do you want to test this hypothesis? And then what is the potential knowledge gained with this work? Posters are always judged based on the level or and stage of the trainee. But it's all about getting experience and feedback. Think about the WCHRI Research Day as an opportunity for you to show your work. If you're just at the initial stages, you may have the opportunity to talk to someone who will discuss the work with you, and you can adjust how you're going to conduct the research. Or maybe that you are already working a lot and things are not working. Sometimes in the lab experiments, they just go wrong. They just don't work. And this may be an opportunity for you to talk to other researchers and collect ideas on how to troubleshoot. So don't be afraid. and please submit. And this may be your first time, and you may be nervous, but we all been there. It gets better with time sometimes, but it's an opportunity. So even if you don't have data, you are encouraged to submit. So the weekly research day will be on November 6th, as Flavio mentioned. We have the weekly research day website. Not sure if this will work. So if you click this link over here, I think this will be available after. And you can go to the weekly research day website. The address is here, and where you're gonna find all the information required. Besides, when you go to REDCap, so you're gonna be required to provide the authors of your abstract, the title of your abstract, your abstract, which is the 4 components: introduction, background, methods, results, and conclusions. And you're also going to be required to provide your ORC ID. If you never heard about this, so this is basically an author identifier. It's free. We should all have one. And think of this as your health card number. So every time you go to the doctor, you have to provide them with your health card number, so your doctor knows who you are. If you have a very common name, let's say, I don't know, John Smith, how many John Smiths are out there? So how would your doctor know who you are? Here, it is the same thing. So the ORC ID was created to link publications, manuscript, abstract to the researchers, so that we know that this person is responsible for all this work. And it's having one, and when you identify, allows WCHRI to track research outcomes, and also ensure that you are credited for this opportunity. So it's gained both ways. You should log into your account. You're going to be required to include the number. If you have one, if not, you should create one. So I think over here it's easier to show. So this is my account, a screenshot. So basically, when you at the top here, you can sign in or register. If you have one, you just sign in, and if not, you can register. It is free. It's just a few steps. And once you create one, you can tell people who you are. So here I have my employment history, my education, so where I did my undergraduate, my PhD, and my work. So all publications that I have are listed here. And then I also have this number over here, which is my ID. And this is the number that you will be required to copy in order to submit your weekly abstract. So this is not something new. This is required for, especially for publications, and it's really helpful. So I'm pretty sure you may have seen this if you're reading scientific papers. So usually you have the name of the author, and then you have this green button, the ID button, and it's usually a link. So if you click here, you can read all manuscripts that, in this case, that I published. But for every author of the paper, you have the ID, and you can click and see what other work this person has published. This is helpful to know who did the work. And it's also helpful because usually when you publish one manuscript on a topic, you are very likely to have other manuscripts. And if you are interested in this specific topic, if you track the author, you can also find additional resources that may be of interest. So after you submit your abstract to Weekly Research Day, your abstract will be scored and will be selected. All relevant abstracts will be posted on the Weekly Research Day. And the abstract that are reviewed and recommended for presentation, they will be either selected for a poster presentation or for an oral presentation. The poster presentation will be a 5-minute presentation and an oral presentation will be 10 minutes. And the learning session on how to prepare your presentation for Weekly Research Day will be on October 2nd. And additional information will be provided in the next few weeks. So specific to the Weekly Research Day abstract, so when you are in the REDCap space, and for the introduction, methods, results, and conclusion, you'll be allowed 3,300 characters. And this means 3,300. It's not 3,301. So as a general idea, you would write your abstract in a Word document or another source, and you're gonna copy and paste into the REDCap space. When you do so, please read double check what is in REDCap, just to make sure that everything is as you expected. Sometimes you do a beautiful job on the Word document, but then you copy and paste and some special characters will just mess it up and words will just glue together. I don't know why, but it happens. So just make sure you double check. And finally, the presenter does not need to be the first author. Usually, the person presenting the work, it is the first author, but this is not a requirement. So, and the reason is sometimes you are the presenter, you are the first author, but then, I don't know, you get sick and you cannot attend weekly, so a second person could present the work. And please make sure that you and your supervisor proofread the abstract as the submission is final. So if there are any typos, this will not be correct, and the abstract will be published as it was submitted. So with that, thank you, and we're gonna move to the next part.
All right. Thank you, Amanda. It was very informative. I think now we're going to open it up for some Q&A questions that you may have. I see there was already one in the chat, which I think was addressed by Amanda at the tail end there, but I'll just read it out, and because I do feel like there's some slight differences here. So someone had a question about whether conceptual or theoretical papers from the social sciences are acceptable at Weekly Research Day, or if it's only empirical papers. Now, Amanda, I know you talked about maybe methods or proposals or kind of incomplete manuscripts. For the person who had answered this, is this kind of what you were thinking, or were you thinking of something else in terms of conceptual or theoretical?
Okay, so I'm not entirely sure if the theoretical work would be accepted. I think Michelle may be the best person to answer. What I was talking about is you can still have a basic science project that you are, it's a work in progress. So you, especially for I was thinking about a summer student, you have been funded by Weekly during the summer, you are required to present now during the weekly research day. The deadline is approaching and the work is not complete. It doesn't mean that you cannot present. You can still present the overall idea, what you collected. So it was more in this line of thinking.
Yeah, and I can add to that because I'm more from a social science background, and I've definitely proposed research. Like I had just started my thesis topic, and so I basically presented and submitted an abstract based on my thesis proposal, because at the end of the day, it's still really nice to get that exposure and the experience talking in front of people about what you intend to do. So yes, definitely, I know that. I'm just hoping for the person who, it was an anonymous post, but I was hoping that that answered their question, or if they had something else in mind in terms of what they meant by theoretical or conceptual. So we have.
And can I just say something while we're waiting for some of the other questions to come in? I mean, I guess first I want to just congratulate Flavio and Amanda on really great presentations. There's a lot of great information there. I guess, from my perspective, I really just want to reiterate a couple of points that I thought were particularly important, and I think these nicely came up in both Amanda and Flavio's. The first point I want to reiterate is, relates back to Flavio's first comment of his presentation, and that is, and again, Amanda mentioned it as well, is don't wait till the last minute. I think in a lot of people's minds, an abstract 200 to 350 words can seem deceptively simple, but it turns out that it's actually far more difficult to write something succinctly. I think it was Mark Twain that famously said, I don't have time to write a short letter, so I had to write a long one instead. So I think that really sort of emphasizes that. And the other point, of course, and as Amanda mentioned as well, is that the reason to do it well in advance is to give the other authors on your abstract ample time to be able to revise and review as needed. The second point I wanted to make, and I think you guys both did a really nice job, is kind of relates back to the key characteristics of an abstract. And I think you both mentioned, the abstract should be focused, succinct, and really tell a story. That's the sort of the main message that I got. And I think the other aspect that I was alluded to throughout the presentation was clarity. From my perspective, clarity and understanding really should be one of the primary considerations when you're writing an abstract. Often we see these abstracts where trainees are cramming in so much data because they want to show off how much work they've done over the summer and how productive they've been. But at the end of the day, with that much data inside an abstract, you just don't have the room to be able to explain the details or the nuance of it. And so oftentimes, I can't remember who it was that said it, but sometimes less is more. And so again, really sort of focus on making a nice, clear message that's easily understandable to your audience. So those are my two key points, but I think you guys did a great job in summarizing all the key points.
Thank you. I see in the chat, so the question wasn't necessarily about proposed or proposals or theoretical in that sense, but whether or not sociological research, so not using empirical data, but whether it's almost like an open conversation is what I'm understanding, or just can that type of work be presented if there's not any empirical data being used or going to be collected? I think, Michelle, maybe that's a better question towards you in terms of maybe what's been presented in the past, or does that still fall in line? Even though it sounds like this would still be relevant to women and children's health.
I don't think that we have any specific instructions posted, with respect to what we will not take. So if your supervisor is willing to sponsor this abstract, then we are willing to consider it. And it does go through abstract review prior to being presented at research days. So please do go ahead and use the opportunity to your advantage.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, I think if you're unsure, I think it's you know, unless it's something completely irrelevant, it's always maybe good practice to submit because it does get you in the practice of being succinct with your idea, and the fact that it is being reviewed. I guess that's a good way to also find out whether or not it will be accepted at WCHRI or not. Are there any other questions around abstracts or WCHRI Research Day that maybe you felt weren't addressed by the speakers today, or you just have in general?
Someone just raised their hand, Stephen.
Yeah.
Oh. Hala, go ahead, please. Hala, did you still have a question?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. My laptop just completely shut down, but I'm gonna speak from Alicia's account.
Okay.
So I know on the website it says that abstract submissions opened on July 5th, but there isn't actually a link allowing us to submit our abstract yet. Will that be up anytime soon?
There's a form that's up online. So
Really?
if you have trouble accessing the form, you need to complete a form. You can't upload anything. You need to complete the form that's online. So if you are having problems accessing the form that's online, just email the wcgrants@ualberta.ca email and we will help you.
Sounds good. Also, I know, Amanda, you mentioned that the maximum was 3,300 characters. Is that per section or is it the entire abstract?
It's the entire abstract, including introduction, methods, results, and discussion. You have a separate space for you to include the title. So it's 3,300 for the 4 components of your abstract.
Sounds good. Thank you.
I'm going to suggest to all of you that you go into the form that's posted online and look at all of the requirements before you start writing anything. For each section, the requirement is detailed, and where there is a character limitation, it is provided. So if you haven't gone in and looked at all of the information, it could be very difficult for you to craft your abstract concisely and succinctly as our presenters have suggested. Okay.
I see another question in the chat. I think this could be answered either by Amanda or Flavio, because it's kind of a combination of what you both presented on. So there's a question, since we should not comment on trends, what should basic science projects do about experiments yet to be completed?
Can start answer this one and Amanda can jump in. But if you don't have results yet, so you're gonna focus more on the methods that you are developing and the expected outcomes from your project rather than the actual results because you don't have that. So I would go in further details in the assessment tools, statistical analysis. So provide everything that you have been doing and what do you expect to find rather than what you found in this case?
Yeah, I would agree, especially because if you have ongoing experiments, these are not your final result. So this trend may be true or maybe not. So I would just add focus on what you expect. And then what you can do is you would write your abstract framed as your background, your proposed methods, expected outcomes. And then when you're going to present your abstract, for your poster, you may include those pilot experiments you're doing, those ongoing experiments as, okay, so we are not done yet, but this is what we are. Because there is a difference between writing the abstract and then presenting the data. So you are writing the abstract based on what you have today. And then, but it doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to include some of this pilot data that you've been collecting in your final poster for your presentation. Okay.
Alternatively, if you want to do a preliminary analysis with what you have so far, just make it clear in your study design and the settings that this represents a preliminary analysis. And in your future directions, you can say that it will continue and the sample size, for example, would increase, and then the results might be different when you are completed the, but make it clear that is a preliminary analysis. You could put it as in your title, you could put this in your methods, just to make clear that you didn't reach your sample size or the project's incomplete.
Yeah, that's the point I was going to make as well, is that to just make it clear that it is preliminary, because again, there might be an issue about sort of disseminating the wrong message, but it might be also an opportunity for individuals to come in and provide some feedback, and then perhaps kind of alter the course of your experiments if they see certain sort of trends or something. Maybe they can offer helpful suggestions that might help get back to the or to a better answer, to a more refined conclusion. So again, by all means, present that kind of data, but again, just make it clear that it is a work in progress. It's one of the benefits of presenting your work at a conference, is to get feedback and to start those conversations.
Yeah, I think just to add to that point, I think sometimes from like social sciences background, where maybe we're the secondary data, so everything's been collected, and you're doing your cleaning and maybe some descriptives. Would you say, I'll ask the panel, would you say it's acceptable to include some of that, as long as it's clear that it's preliminary? Because sometimes, you want to probe things further, and that's, you just got your hands on the data and you're trying to figure it out. Would you recommend presenting that as preliminary, or just sticking to maybe a proposed research and putting that stuff on the poster instead?
I think it's all about how you frame. I think you can frame both ways, and it's you just have to be clear on how you're doing. I mean, I think if you pick both sides, it will be valid. You're putting yourself out there. It's just like how you frame, like what the message is. We are trying to be clear. Oh, this is still preliminary. We are still analyzing the data, but we do have a lot of data. So it's more like I try to think as we have like a hypothesis and objective, and sometimes it will be like a small one, and that is even if you are like still the study is not complete, and it's most of the time it's never completed. You've done some experiments, but you still have a bunch of other things that you want to do. You just have to look at your data sometimes and think on how to frame in a way to this be its own question, and then you tell a story. That's the most important. Even if it's an incomplete story, you just have to tell people, okay, I'm still working on this. But both ways would be valid for me.
I would just add in that that the important thing here is that, okay, preliminary adds lots of stuff, but you need to be at least sure that the accuracy of the data that you collect is still on point. So for example, you transfer the data to some, but this data was not double checked. So I wouldn't suggest just do something without double checking the data or without cleaning the data, because this might provide some incorrect results. But if you have your data, you might play around with that, and later on you decide to go to a different direction. That is not a problem. Just like make sure that the data is accurate before doing anything with that.
Yeah, I had one other, if there's no questions currently, I'll just ask another question, and it might help some of you who are kind of in that phase of proposed work, but with no results or no findings. Is there was a moment, I think Flavio, you had mentioned, if you do have incomplete data, don't present future directions. But then I think in Amanda's presentation, you said when you do have proposed data, you can talk about maybe implications. So maybe just distinguish between what, or more clarity, I guess, between the future direction side versus like the practical implications might be helpful.
I think there is a different what you expect to find and what is future directions. In what I was meaning is that, for example, I found that this is related to that. So the future direction is based on this result, what I'm going to do now in the future. Rather than, for example, when you have an incomplete project, you are discussing the possibilities of what can happen in the future. So they're kind of they look alike, but they have some different nuances, so you can discuss specifics on that.
Yeah, I agree. I think if it was not clear, Flavio now clarified. I think that's how you should approach this. Okay.
And then so for the practical implications with proposed work, that's just so someone shouldn't really be speaking to the future directions, but they can speak to practical implications of the work in general, not necessarily their results.
So I think that's also, we have a person speaking to the clinical researchers and one to the basic science. So for the basic science, it's very common. I mean, it's not an absolute truth, but it's very common for you to have a sentence at the end about these implications, the significance of your work, rather than future directions. So for basic science, it's like, we did this is why it's important. So this is more like and sometimes we'll be like, how is it clinical relevant? Because you're working with rats and mice, or sometimes with cell cultures. Why is this relevant to human health? I always like to ask this specific question, which will be it will be, I mean, it is different from what Flavio was talking about, because he's doing a clinical study. So he's working with human beings. I myself, I work with rats. So at the end, I always like to tell my reader, why should you care about this? And this is, and sometimes it will be like the clinical relevancy, or just the overall, why is it important? And it depends on what you are doing. I think it's something that it's one of the things that are different about the clinical abstract and then the basic science abstract.
Okay. Thank you for both of you for clarifying those points. I believe we're right at time. Michelle, did you have anything, closing remarks you wanted to say about abstract submission, other than to encourage everyone to go and look at the form, and that could also help answer some of the questions?
I think there's also guidelines up, but if you have any problems accessing any of the materials, please make sure that you email us. Your first point of contact should always be your supervisor. So please don't send questions to WC Grants if you have not already spoken to your supervisor. It's super important that you do, you know, have these discussions with your supervisor before you email anybody. It's very early on, so there are a number of you, especially if you're in summer student kind of position right now. It's very early on in your summer studentship role to be considering an abstract. So don't worry too much about right now. It's kind of a work in progress. And if you need this presentation as a resource as you get closer to writing your abstract, it'll be posted on our website. So we will have that resource updated for you in the WCHRI RD website as well. Is there anything else anybody needs any support with?
It doesn't see that. I see the important dates have been posted in the chat along with a few links. So if no one else has any other questions at this time, I think it's okay if we end the meeting here. And we look forward to seeing the abstracts come in and everyone hopefully able to attend or present at WCHRI Research Day.
Thank you so much, everyone.